all I am saying is give peace a Vance. JD Vance takes center stage on Fox News yesterday, answering questions about the situation in Ukraine, the situation with Zelensky, the situation with the peace agreement. And I have to tell you, this guy, he went from junior senator from Ohio to vice president of the United States and seems to have made the transition better than any vice president in history. Clearly, he is moving to the top of the list for contenders in 2028. If he's already there, then he's definitely solidifying his place at the top of that list for potential, I guess you would say, potential future presidents when President Donald Trump term limits out. Yesterday, the saga with Zelensky continues to just baffle so many people here in the United States of America and roil so many others overseas, people in France and Great Britain and Ukraine. And it is definitely one of those issues where there's what they're telling you in the media and what's actually happening on the ground. And since JD Vance has been privy to all of these, and in fact, JD Vance was one of the sparks that ignited the conversation that really got the passions flaring and flying in the Oval Office last week. He was asked by Sean Hannity on Fox News, what can Zelensky do to restart negotiations with the United States? And is all lost? Here is what JD Vance told him.
I think that if he called and had a serious proposal for how he was going to engage in the process, look, there are details that really matter that we're already working on with the Russians. We've already talked with some of our allies. He needs to engage seriously on the details. I think once that happens, then absolutely we want to talk to
you. Convince Putin and the Russians are willing to meet them, I don't want to say the word halfway. They're willing to do their part to achieve a negotiated settlement.
Am I convinced? No. But do I think that there's a real pathway? You got to trust but verify. You've got to engage in the negotiation. You've got to see what steps people are willing to take. This is another thing, Sean, obviously I'm biased because I really love the guy, but when the media attacks President Trump as somehow on the side of Putin, two big problems with that. First of all, the only president in 20 years where you haven't had the Russians take a bunch of territory was under the first term of Donald J. Trump. The second part of that is you've got to actually accept that President Trump, he's not just assuming that everything the Russians tell him is true. He's negotiating with them. There's a give and take. There's a trust but verify. That's called diplomacy. We used to have some respect for that in Washington, D.C.
And we don't anymore because we're playing with bit players like a former comedian turned president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, who, for whatever reason, blew up what JD Vance again refers to as a ceremonial signing of a rare minerals agreement and a security agreement that was basically solidified. When he showed up, it wasn't supposed to be an argument. It wasn't supposed to be continued debate. It was the end of a lengthy process until, of course, the tables were turned.
When the Ukrainians came to Washington on Friday, it was supposed to be ceremonial. There had been some public back and forth, some disagreements, some words spoken in public. And the president was like, let's have this moment. We give some credit to the brave Ukrainian fighters. And of course, it's a very brave army that they have there in Ukraine. Let's sign this minerals deal, which importantly does two things. It allows the American people to get some of their money back, but it also shows the Ukrainian people that America has a long-term investment in their sovereignty. You do those things, we'll sign this thing, we'll have a rah-rah moment, and then we'll get to the tough talk of negotiating peace. We couldn't even get the Ukrainians to a point where they could talk about the peaceful settlement. And look, in some ways, Sean, I get it. I get the frustration. I get the rage. It's their country. Of course, it's not our country, but you've got to accept cooler heads have got to prevail. This thing cannot go on forever. This is the important point. I'd say this to our, of course, most importantly, the Americans who are watching, but people all over the world. When you talk to leaders in private, whether they're Ukrainian or European, when you talk to people in private, they will tell you this cannot go on forever. There aren't enough Ukrainian lives, there isn't enough American money, and there isn't enough ammunition to fund this thing indefinitely. The only realistic pathway to bringing this thing to a settlement is President Trump's pathway. We encourage both President Zelensky and President Putin to follow that path.
And when you look at what Donald Trump has said repeatedly, he's saying that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get peace. I'm trying to get Russia to the table. I'm trying to get Ukraine to the table. But he's having trouble with the two parties that are involved, or at least one of them, wanting to end the war. It seems like this is a character. in Vladimir Zelensky, who has found comfort and solace in a never-ending war. And that is not something that anybody wants. That is not something that J.D. Vance thinks is appropriate. That's not something that Donald Trump thinks is appropriate. That's not something that even I would think Vladimir Putin wants to do. Vladimir Putin will gladly fight a war for the rest of his life, but he probably doesn't want to. The only people that seem to be on Vladimir Zelensky's side with a never-ending war raging in Eastern Europe are the Europeans, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, and the rest of that group who've been pledging more support, not just financial support for military aid, but also boots on the ground and planes in the air. And JD Vance says that's a dangerous strategy, and you're basically just placating the guy.
Sean, I think our European friends, frankly, are being really, they're doing a disservice to the Ukrainians because their own populations are saying, we're not going to fund this war indefinitely. The American people are saying, we don't want to fund the war indefinitely. So the only thing that is in the best interest of America, of Russia, of Ukraine, and of Europe is to bring this thing to a close. What happened, Sean, is you have Zelensky. He goes to Europe, and a lot of our European friends puff him up. They say, you're a freedom fighter. You need to keep fighting forever. Well, fighting forever with what? With whose money, with whose ammunition, and with whose lives? The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying, this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
There is only one strategy that works. There is only one plan in place that will do what everybody we supposedly think wants to do. There's only one plan that will bring peace, that will end the war, that will stop the killing, that will stop the destruction, and that will rebuild Ukraine and keep Ukraine safe in the future. Only one plan exists, and that is the Trump plan. And for some reason, there's a lot of people on this world that aren't happy with that. Maybe because it's the Trump plan.
And here's the thing, when you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, it's another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them, what's the plan? Okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
It wasn't a strategy for the Democrats, but it was a great way for them to put a lot of money in their pocket, not just their pocket, but the pocket of other Ukrainians and other dictators and other oligarchs like Vladimir Zelensky and every single general that was under his command. That's why they all ended up in Spain on the coast for the summer. That's why they all drove around in Ferraris. That's why his wife was able to purchase that uber expensive car. And that's why they find themselves on the cover of Vogue magazine, not to mention flown around to various award ceremonies and parties with heads of state who call them legends and icons and brave and heroes. And why would you want any of that to end? You wouldn't. And that's why Volodymyr Zelensky said yesterday, this war will go on for a very, very, very long time. And that is something that President Donald Trump was not happy about and told everybody how unhappy about that statement he was.
President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
He better not be right. That better not be his plan. If that's his plan, that's a problem. And what he should do is he should thank his lucky stars that he has someone like President Donald Trump back in the White House to end this war once and for all.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border. This country really was like the fence on the border. It was very important to Europe, and I'm not knocking Europe. I'm saying that they were a lot smarter than Joe Biden because Joe Biden didn't have a clue. He just gave money hand over fist. And they should have been able to equalize with us. In other words, if we gave $1, they should have given. Well, we gave $350 billion. They probably gave $100. But on top of it all, they get their money back because they're doing it in the form of a loan, and it's a secured loan. So when I saw that, which I've known about for a little while, I said it's time for us to be smart. At the same time, it's great for them because they get us in the country taking the rare earth, which is going to fuel this big engine, and especially the engine that we've in a very short time created. And we get something, and we're there. We have a presence there. With all of that being said, I want one thing to happen. I want all of those young people to stop being killed. They're being killed by the thousands every single week. Last week, 2,700 were killed. 2,700 young, in this case, just about all young boys from Ukraine and from Russia. And that's not young people from the United States, but it's on a human basis. I want to see it stop. The money is one thing, but the death. And they're losing thousands of soldiers a week. And that's not including the people that get killed every time a town goes down or a missile goes into a town. And I want to see it stop.
What does it say when the president of a country cares less about his own citizens than the president of another country does? Donald Trump seems to be the only one talking about the loss of life in Ukraine, the Ukrainians who are being killed, who many of whom are being kidnapped right off the street and driven to the front lines with a gun in their hand saying, go fight the Russians. Same thing happens in Russia. It is a brutal and it's a disgusting and it's an unnecessary war, and it needs to stop. And Donald Trump said, look, if you sign this deal, if you give us the rare earth minerals, then we will go in, we will excavate them and mine them and ship them out here. We will have an economic interest. We will rebuild your country and we will keep it secure. Because if we have an economic interest in Ukraine, ain't nobody, especially Vladimir Putin, going to come in and try to take over your country. It does everything that it needs to do. It ends the war. It begins the peace. It rebuilds your country better than before. And it gives you the security that you're looking for long term. That is, if you're looking for long-term security. And it's way better security than what you're going to get from anyone in Europe or any NATO ally. In fact, JD Vance mentioned that as well. He talked about how this is a better deal for Ukraine. And what if they continue to go to Europe and NATO and beg for scraps here and there, they're gonna end up devastated.
If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
You know, I didn't have JD Vance calling England a random country when he was elected. That's not why I voted for him, but I'll take it. It's a great added bonus for him to say some random country sending 20,000 troops who hasn't fought a war in over 60 years. That's about the long and the short of it. And that's what Ukraine is facing. Look, Donald Trump, in addition to this peace deal, has done an incredible amount of things. The tariffs that he's instituted that went into effect on Canada and China and Mexico because of their continued abuse of the American drug trade and pumping fentanyl into our country and killing Americans. Those happen at midnight. And yes, you'll see some changes, but hopefully all for the better, because Donald Trump has been working diligently since day one to execute on his agenda, make sure that he's checking off the things on his to-do list and doing it at a rapid pace. And that's what he'll be discussing tonight in his joint session of Congress, his speech to the joint session of Congress. And Caroline Levitt gave us a little preview of that yesterday.
The American people, in fact, have never supported President Trump more than they do today. Every single one of his policies, when you go down the list, to your point, the vast majority of Americans support those policies. You look at the recent polling that showed from Harvard-Harris that showed 77% of Americans support a full investigation into the waste, fraud, and abuse that our federal government has been spending their hard-earned tax dollars on. So President Trump has his finger on the pulse of the American public. He knows what they elected him to do, and he's committed to doing it. Just look at his first month in office, and you'll hear him talk about that in his joint address to Congress tomorrow night. All of the accomplishments across the board, from bringing foreign investments back here to America to create good-paying jobs. Look at the border. February border numbers out this weekend. You had one of the largest declines in history of illegal border crossings. Only 8,000 people in the month of February, and virtually all of them were either arrested arrested, immediately returned home, or prosecuted for crimes that they committed against our country. Under the previous administration, there were 8,000 to 10,000 people crossing every single day. And it's because of the historic action that has been taken by this president, virtually all through executive authority, I may add. We haven't even gotten started when it comes to Congress and passing President Trump's legislative agenda.
And there you go. So that's what we're going to be seeing tonight in front of Congress. Donald Trump's going to be talking about the border and the way that he's been able to shut down the border, shut down the illegal crossings, basically close our country, and then begin to evict all the illegal criminals who are here, well, illegally and committing crimes. Then he's going to talk about the war in Ukraine. He's going to talk about the saving girls in sports. He's going to have some special guests who are female athletes who've been directly affected by these transgender woke policies that allowed biological men to compete against women in sports, putting their lives in danger. And then, of course, he's going to talk about the tariffs. He's going to talk about the investments in this country. He's going to talk about the TSMC investment. There was a big investment yesterday, another $500 billion, taking the total, by the way, to $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion that Donald Trump was able to secure in investment here in the United States in just about like a month. And this new investment is huge, not just for the United States, but for Taiwan and for everybody who lives here, especially in Arizona.
Today, Taiwan Semiconductor is announcing that they will be investing at least $100 billion in new capital in the United States over the next short period of time to build state-of-the-art semiconductor manufacturing facilities. I think mostly it's going to be in Arizona, which is what I understand, which is a great state. I like it because I won it, but I won most of them, actually. But I did. We won it, and we won it big. The most powerful AI chips in the world will be made right here in America, and it'll be a big percentage of the chips made by his company. But as you know, they're based mostly in Taiwan, and they're far and away the biggest. There's nobody even close. This $100 billion in new investment will go into building 5 cutting-edge fabrication facilities in the great state that we just discussed, Arizona, and will create thousands of jobs, many thousands of jobs, and high-paying jobs. In total, today's announcement brings Taiwan Semiconductor investments to about $165 billion. They've started already.
And they're probably going to bring in more because of the tariffs. Tariffs work, folks. When you put tariffs on a country, the people that build things there and ship things out have one choice, or two choices, rather. They can pay the tariffs or they can move their factories to the United States of America. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has suggested.
The United States has been taken advantage of for 40 years. The United States has been a laughingstock for years and years. That's why this gentleman is built in Taiwan instead of building here. It would have been better if he built here. If we had a president that knew what they were doing, and we had a lot of them very bad on trade. Look, I'm a huge fan of Ronald Reagan, but he was bad on trade, very bad on trade. He allowed a lot of people, a lot of businesses to be taken. So I say that with due respect because he was so great on other things, but he was bad on trade. We are setting records right now, records like nobody has ever seen before. When you have companies like this coming in and almost 40% of their company in one signature is going to be devoted to what he does, which is one of the most important businesses in the world. That's an unbelievable thing. When Apple now is going to start building all of their plants here, all because of what we've done in terms of, it's not because he likes me or they like me. They don't probably like me at all. I don't know. I think he likes me a little bit at least. But you know what? It's the incentive we created or the negative incentive. I mean, it's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country. They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs. It's a very powerful weapon that politicians haven't used because they were either dishonest, stupid, or paid off in some other form. And now we're using them.
And now it's working great. And we've got a great president and a great vice president. And tonight we're going to see both of them at the special address to Congress. We're going to do a live show starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you'd like to join us live, an hour before Donald Trump is set to speak, he's set to speak at around 9. That'll probably be closer to 9:15. We'll go live at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll do a preview of the speech, what you can expect. There's going to be probably some angry, disruptive Democrats. There always are. And then we'll bring you the speech live. So make sure that you're subscribe to this channel. Make sure that you are listening. Make sure that you tune in every single day for the 47 Daily podcast. Also, we have a second podcast, which we do every single day at noon. It's called Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. And if you want more in-depth information and more stories, not just from the White House, but from all over the world, interviews and long-form content, it's a fantastic podcast. We do it live right here on YouTube and Rumble and everywhere else that you can find a live stream, or you can go to iTunes or Spotify and download it and listen at your leisure. Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. Download, listen, and enjoy.